So this video is going to be uploaded in two separate parts. The first part, we're going to look at flight 11, flight 175 and flight 77. The second part of this video, we're going to take apart flight 93. The second part that I'm going to upload after this is going to refer back heavily to my previous video on Saturn. If you haven't seen that, I suggest you go watch it because I'm going to be referencing a lot of stuff from that video in this video. So two-parter, flight 93 is coming in the second part. First of all, we're going to start off with 9 and 11, and we're going to look at why they use those numbers. If you can see on the screen right now, I just pulled this up. I'm pretty sure most of you have probably seen this before. This was essentially the information that made the ball start rolling for people like me, conspiracy theorists as you'd call us. All these strange coincidences that just happen to all equal 11. A lot of this is surface information that a lot of you do know, so I'm not going to go over it. If you haven't seen it before, then pause it, have a read through, look at all the 11s. One I will make note of is, as you can see here, September 11th is 254, day of the calendar year. 2 plus 5 plus 4 is 11. There's also 111 days remaining till the end of the year. That's one I will make note of because it's not up there. Other than that, if you haven't seen it before, pause it, look into it. If you know about that shit, then we're just going to get straight into it. Now, when you Google the meaning of 11, 22, 33, you get told that they're master numbers. And then you get some really convoluted description where they just attach random words to numbers. For example, they'll tell you that 2 means intuitiveness, or 7 represents completion. But they won't tell you why. And always hated this new agey bullshit. When I got into studying this shit when I was like 15, I found this a lot, and it's so unsatisfactory. Like, it doesn't accurately reflect the metaphysics behind the numbers, and it wasn't really till I got deep into the occult and Pythagoras and people like that you really realize that these numbers do have attributes behind them. So what I'm going to do now is try to explain the metaphysics behind the 11 and the 9 and why they were used in this particular ritual. Now, as I've previously stated, throughout many occult practices, including Pythagorean numerology, 1 represents God due to its indivisible nature. Now, I'm not going to go into a deep explanation of this because I've done that in my previous video. However, just know 1 represents God, but 11, now this is 2 1s. So, metaphysically speaking, we have God replicated. Now, in esoteric theories or emanation systems of belief, the 1, or God, typically replicates himself, thus providing a vehicle for conscious experience. So 11 could be there to represent the departing from source, or God, into a much lower vibratory frequency, such as 3-dimensional reality. Insofar as the actual characters, the way they're shaped, if you've read Crowley's 777, then you know that one of the key things to do in looking into the meaning of a number and what it's used for, and a letter as well, is to look at the shape. So the character 11 also stands as a symbol which looks like 2 poles or 2 pillars, which brings us to this idea of polarity. I discussed this in my previous video heavily. If you haven't read the Kabbalah, read it. Hermeticism is a wonderful philosophy, and this 11 and these twin pillars or 2 poles tie in directly with Jachin and Boaz, the 2 twin pillars of Freemasonry, who you will see right here. Boaz, Jachin, these are the 2 twin pillars that stood outside of Solomon's temple, and you will see these all over Masonic art, images and regalia. Notice the similarities, yeah. Jachin, Boaz, towers. Now 11 is also a higher form of 2, according to Pythagorean numerology, of course, because 1 and 1 is reduced to 2. So this is a quote from Secret Teachings of All Ages by Pythagoras on the two, or the duad. By the power of the two, the deep was created, much like Plato's forms, a mirror of perfection, a mirror of the heavens. I have another good quote here from the Chaldean Mysteries on the duad, the two, or the 11. They said it was called audacity, from its being the earliest number to separate itself from the divine one. So take from that what you will. Now, insofar as the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, the 11th Sephiroth is the hidden Sephiroth, typically not shown. When you look at a regular Tree of Life, you'll see 10 Sephiroth and 22 path, making a sum total of 32. However, upon mastery of the Tree of Life, you reveal the 11th Sephiroth, Darth, or Death, or Darth. And this ties in perfectly with Darth Vader, but I will get back to that a little bit later. So the hidden Sephiroth, let's see. On the Kabbalists, as you can see here, they say that this seems to have been a type of number with an evil reputation among all people. The Kabbalists contrasted it with the perfection of the Decad. Just as the Sephirotic number is the form of all good things, so 11 is the essence of all that is sinful, harmful, and imperfect. So the Decad is the 10. Now, in relation to the Decad, he is talking about this one right here. This is Malkuth, this is a kingdom. This is us. This is the lowest point in the Tree of Life, and thus represents three-dimensional reality. So for the Kabbalists, the 11th Sephiroth is contrasted with the perfection of the Decad. So the perfection of the earth. So from the perfection of Malkuth comes dark. However, there is a flip side to that, and this is that. So Kabbalists also write on the 11, knowledge void and the abyss, the secret invisible non-Sephiroth, often called the void. It is the coming together of the divine form of wisdom, understanding, Chokmah and Binah, the light of beauty, Keter and Teferet, and love and accountability of Chesed. So essentially what they're saying is this Sephiroth comes with the balance of these here. Again, bringing us back to this idea of polarity, and this will make more sense later on. Darth, previously invisible and mysterious, is now revealing itself for the first time. It is the center of the Star of David and makes up Sephiroth 1 to 6. As you can see here, if you overlay a Star of David in the top part of the Tree of Life, it sits perfectly. Each point sits perfectly on a Sephiroth, and the perfection of that Star of David, or the perfection of these 6 Sephiroth, the perfection of Tiferet, Hesed, Chokmah, Keter, Binah, and Guvara brings forth dark, or death, or knowledge, or the abyss. You choose what side you act on, because we have free will. Darth Vader chose to bring forth the dark. It's pretty much that simple. So that was a bit on the 11. Now let's go over the 9. And both of these numbers tie in together, so we will be coming back to the 11. So the number 9, also known as the Ennead, and typically associated with cycles and endings because it's the last single digit number in reduction method, and all numbers multiplied by 9 can be reduced by 9. So 9 continually returns to itself. As you can see here, is a quote from Anton LaVey. Despite others attempt to identify a certain number, 666, with Satan, it will be known that 9 is his number. 9 is the number of the ego, for it always returns to itself. No matter what is done through the most complex multiplication, no matter what is done by the most complex multiplication of 9 by any other number, in the final equation, 9 alone will stand forth. I'm pretty sure most of you know that about 9. But when you think about that metaphysically, it takes on a whole different meaning. Here's a quote here by Westcott from Numbers and Their Occult Powers and Virtues. He says that 9 holds great significance among Masonic orders and secret societies. There is a Masonic order of 9 elected knights, in which 9 roses, 9 lights, and 9 knocks are used. In fact, the number 9 is the number of Earth under evil influences. Makes sense, right? Number of Satan, Earth under evil influences. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now, some mystery schools hold 9 in veneration. Life cycle, obviously pregnancy. However, typically we see 9 in a negative light. Pythagoras connected it with failures and shortcomings because it stopped one short of the decad, which is 10, or Malkuth. In the Eleusinian mysteries, it was looked upon as evil because it was an inverted 6, and as I've said before, about 100 times, 6 is the first perfect number. It was an inversion of this number, so an inversion of perfection. 9 was the number of the spheres through which the consciousness passed its way to birth. This idea can also be seen in the shape of the 9, as it looks like a sort of opening or a portal spiraling outwards. In both of these images you can see the 9, but you can also see a fractal pattern that represents the opening of a portal, and if you've ever taken any psychedelic drugs you know exactly what I'm talking about. We can see in both of these images here the 6 and the 9 are contained within these portal-like spirals. 6 typically, because of the way you write it, starting from the top point circling down, is known to be the closing of a portal. 9 starting from the center point and working outward is usually done with the opening of a portal. And also notice there that Christ died in the 9th hour. So yeah. I found this as well, which was really interesting. So this pattern of multiplication and adding numbers as they go up consecutively by 1, right? You see the pattern, right? And every single sum is just going to keep producing 1. Much like the 11th, and much like how many days were left in the year when September 11th actually happened. So there's definitely a relationship going on there. Now, if you've seen the number 23, Jim Carrey got absolutely fucking slated for this film. I watched it when I was mad young. I didn't really get it, obviously, but I get it now. This whole film is about the metaphysical aspects of the number 9, the inversion of perfection. If you've seen this film, it should make a lot of sense now. 23 is the 9th prime, so that's what that film was about. And shout out to Jim Carrey, man. Yeah, I know he's gone on his whole woke shit recently. He's also on Epstein's flight list, so, you know, be careful what you're listening to right there. Okay, 9 in relation to the Kabbalah. So the 9th Sephirah, Yesod. This is to do with attaining foundation. Okay, now let's have a read. Yesod, foundation, also known as Almighty God, living God, the lower end of the heavens, pillar connecting heaven to earth, seal of truth, the phallus, which means the penis if you don't know, the non-lucid mirror, procreative power, Messiah, covenant. Clearly by the words associated with it, it's a powerful Sephirah, which translates to foundation. Okay, so Yesod is the channel through which Teferet strives to unite, pass on the creative and benevolent divine forces. So it goes with the idea of creation. The previous Sephirah giving it the divine forces to bring forth something new. The Sephirah is symbolized by the Malphalis, sanctified through the covenant of circumcision. So this Sephirah right here, the 9th one, Yesod, is represented by the Malphalis, or the obelisk, as you can see right here. All obelisks are just phallus symbols. It's pretty much that simple. Let's read on. Yesod is associated with the soul, with the power to contact, connect and communicate without a reality. The foundation of the building is its grounding in its union with the earth, Malkuth. Okay, and notice that Yesod sits just above Malkuth. So foundation sits above earth. The Father sits above. You get it? It all goes together very well. So Yesod sits above Malkuth. The phallus of creation sits above the seed of life. Okay. Alright, now, corresponding to the procreative organ of man, Yesod is the foundation of generations to come. The power to procreate is the manifestation of infinity within the finite context of the created human being. Each individual man is small relative to all generations to come from him. The Yesod is referred to as the small limb of man, the small limb that holds the large. So what they're alluding to here is that, in a sense, a man holds within his phallus generations to come of children. So each individual man is small relative to generations to come. So it's this kind of the idea of a macrocosm and a microcosm again. The Yesod is the small and narrow bridge between the infinite potential of procreation that flows into its actual manifestation in the potency of man. So it's to do with this idea of creation, the Mao aspect of creation, that is this phallus and this seed. Also, that's why there's just fucking random big obelisks, like Egyptian obelisks, in the middle of the most random places, like London, Vatican, Washington. I mean, they're in those three particular places because they're independent city-states, and if you don't know that by now, you really need to do more research. The City of London, Vatican City, and Washington, D.C. operate totally on their own rules. They are not part of the constituencies of which they reside in. They are independent bodies and they act completely alone, and they also single-handedly strong-arm the world from those places, with the Jesuits sitting right above them telling them what to do. Now this is a pillar that was moved and it now resides in France. Seem weird to you? Fucking seems weird to me, but hey, so they took this from Egypt and put it in France. Yeah, I wonder why. I wonder why. Luxor, this was built in 1400 BCE, I think, I might be wrong, but I think it's around then. So the fact that they took that and put it in France, just well, it doesn't confuse me. I know why they did it, but it shows you the importance of the phallus symbol, okay? So, quick recap. The 9 is connected to portals, okay? Creation, the inversion of perfection, and in Kabbalah terms, Yesod, this Sephirot right here, which has to do with attaining foundation, much like the 47th problem of a Euclid, but we will get into that later. There's so many things to talk about here that all tie in together. It's a fucking headache. Yeah, 9 is connected to Yesod and foundation, the phallic symbol of creation, hence, again, why we call 9 the ego, since it has a direct correspondence with the Sephirot concerning the procreative organ of man. Do you see how this comes full circle, yeah? And now that kind of allows us to see the number 11 in a new light. Essentially a number whose design is dedicated to the worship of these twin phallic symbols, those which once stood outside Solomon Temple, Jachin and Boaz. 2 twin pillars of creation, and a 9, which symbolizes a portal. So if you're familiar with Tesla and vortex maths, you know that he worked with the 3, 6 and the 9, and the 9 mediates the 3 and the 6, okay? In this respect, the 9 would mediate 2 opposing poles of the 11, understand? So these 2 numbers are connected, 9 and 11, in more ways than one, metaphorically speaking. And it's to do with their relation to phallic symbols, creation, and the Kabbalah. So that was a little background on the 9 and the 11, and why they're so important, what they represent, and why they were used in this particular ritual. Also, a quick bit of gematria that we will expand more on later and circle back to. But notice Yesod equals 68 and 23. Now we already know that 23 is the 9th prime, and you know, there's your relation there. On the 68, we'll get more onto this in the second half of the video, but the World Trade Center construction began in 68, and Bush graduated Skull and Bones in 68. So yeah, but we'll get more into that later. And again, the word foundation, okay, relating to Yesod. Yesod translates to foundation. Sums to both 119 and 47. And as you've probably already noticed, 119 is the shorthand date of 9/11. If you write out the UK way, where you'd put the date first rather than the month. And the 47, well, the 47 runs real deep, especially in DC. But we will explore more on that shortly. Just wanted to bring that to your attention, so when we start connecting the dots, it's easier for you to follow. We had flight 11, and this is apparently a picture taken 4 months before the attack. And this is the plane they apparently used. It's American Airlines, the company, so AA11. 8 is why there's an 8A on the wing. There's also another reason why, but we'll get to that shortly. So that could also be a big 11 on the wing. A is the first letter, 2 A's is 2 1s, same as 11. Also the colours, blue and red. Think of the Matrix, the red and the blue pill. These two seem to always be used as the base colours to represent the duality. Which again brings us back to this idea of pillars and poles and opposing forces and polarity. This little symbol on top of this as well was interesting to me. I don't know if you can see this from here, I'll zoom in. But it's probably supposed to be wings crossed over or an eagle or some shit. I don't really know what they were going for. But to me that just kind of looks like 2 falling towers again. Tilt your head to the side, or 2 towers like crossed over. So it's just more phallic symbolism really. Not really surprised about that. Now, I didn't notice this at first, but if you blow this picture up real big, you wouldn't see it in here, but there's a little number under here, right here, and it says N33 for AA. AA is obviously a reference to American Airline, but N33. I'm not surprised to see a 33 in there. If you know about 33, they're fucking obsessed with the number, like quite literally obsessed with it, and it's all to do with Kundalini. So the World Trade Centers, as you probably already know, were proposed and funded by the Rockefellers, David and Nelson, I'm pretty sure their names were. Against the will of the people. Nobody really wanted it. People in the government didn't want it, and the American people didn't want it. It said that it would ruin the skyline and go against the very nature of the American ideology. However, of course, they managed to get the tower up because they run shit. So, and that tower construction started in '68, right, by the Rockefellers. So, as we read here, the iconic twin towers of downtown Manhattan's World Trade Center were a triumph of human imagination and will, yeah, sure, completed in 1973. Now, if you've seen my video on Saturn, you know why they've been completed in 73. 73 is a big Saturn number to do, yeah? Tower stood at 110 stories, okay? That's the point I want to focus on right now. 110 stories, that's 11. And it's also 110, obviously. So there's another 11, but Osama bin Laden, as you can see, equals 110, and Rockefeller equals 110. So 110 Rockefeller builds the 110 story Twin Towers. Also the 110th day of the year, if you didn't know, for all my stoners out there, is 420. It's also the day they claim that Hitler died. So the 110th day of the year is Hitler's birthday. And lo and behold, Adolf Hitler also equals 110. I'm not making this up. April 20th, 110th day of the year, Adolf Hitler 110, 20th of April, 420. Yeah. If you know about the Reichstag, you probably saw the symbolism and the parallels with 9/11. Reichstag happened in 1933. So that 33 is very fitting. Very fitting. Now the 11s were probably the most obvious ritual on the face of things. Just a quick note as well on predictive programming, just to show you how long this shit's been going on for. If you know about World War One, then you know that Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in his car, which triggered World War One. So this picture right here is an image of his car. This was the number plate AIII118. So this act, when he was killed in this car, triggered World War One. World War One ended with armistice on the 11th of November 1918. Yeah, a date that can be written 11/11/11. But there is something far more peculiar about this event. Yeah, complete coincidence, not predictive programming at all. The car in which Franz Ferdinand was killed had a license plate AIII118, which could refer to armistice as 111118. And death is 118 in Jewish Gematria. So, I mean, that is a fucking perfect bit of predictive programming if I've ever seen one. That's how long they've been finessing you for, pretty much. Also, Death Star 33, Darth Vader 101. Yeah, can you see Darth in the middle? The 101. So Darth sits in the middle. The 101. Imagine the number 11 with a 0 in the middle. That's Darth Vader between the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity. Darth Vader also equals 101, so that is literally what it would look like as a numerical representation of this metaphysical process that I'm talking about, the ones represent the poles on each side, or the pillars of severity, or the pillars of mercy, and then you have this 0 point in the center, this 11, this new consciousness, this knowledge, this death, this godlike being who in Star Wars became manifest as Darth Vader. And Darth Vader also equals 101, so it's another 11, you know. So we looked at flat 11. Now, the next flight they used was flight 175, and this one takes a little more digging to find the answer to, but it is there. And to understand this, we need to understand the importance of the number 47 and the number 74. And to do that, first of all, let's just take a quick look at what happened in the year 1947. I went over this in my last video, so I'm literally going to fly through it. So we got the Cold War, the IMF begins, we had Roswell, India and Pakistan had an independence from British rule, we had the Truman Doctrine, we had the coal industry nationalised, we had the Marshall Plan, had the National Security Act, we have the anniversary of Israel independence, and we all know that the world wars were just a cover up for them to change Palestine back to Zionist owned territory, but we're not going to get into that right now. My point is 47 is a big number, okay? Check this. Okay, so I said this earlier. Construction of the World Trade Center began in 68, yeah? On February the 16th of that same year, the first 911 call was made. 911. The first 911 call was made to the police. Obviously 911 is literally just taking the piss out of you to your face. Look what day it was made on the year. The first ever call, the first ever recorded 911 call was made on the 47th day of the year. That is not by accident, people. That is not by accident. We'll carry on. In Canada, 911 service was adopted in 72, and the first call occurred after a 1974 rollout in London. 74, that number again. So we've got 74 there and 47 there. Now, if in relation to ley lines and geometry, astronomy, if you imagined that the core of the Earth was a star tetrahedron, then the exact point that a sphere would intersect that star tetrahedron is at a 19.47 degree angle. And now the exact point at where this intersects is one of the most powerful ley lines in the world, and it's actually the location of Earth's largest active volcano in Hawaii. I found that really interesting, especially once I remembered about the Mars Pathfinder. And if you read here, you can see NASA probe landed on July the 4th. Oh, is that a date that you write? 47? Yep, I'm pretty sure it is 47 or 7/4. NASA probe landed July the 4th, 1997 at, those were the degrees east, and check the latitude north, 19.47. Also the same coordinates that NASA sent a probe to Mars on the 47 date. Like, doesn't that just sound all a bit too coincidental to you guys? Something's clearly going on with this 47. Clearly. And one more thing, if you didn't know, the Earth is actually tilted at a 23.5 angle. As you can see in this picture here on the right, in the Tropic of Cancer, if you extend this white line down and imagine it goes into the Tropic of Capricorn, you'd have this 23.5 degree angle in both hemispheres, okay? So that would equate to 47. And it is this tilt that gives us our seasons, our 4 seasons. So it's this 47 degree tilt that gives us summer, spring, winter and whatnot. Very, very important number. So I guess now we can see why Independence Day of America is celebrated on the 4th of July, the date written 47 or 11/4, when Independence Day equals 74. No surprises there. Remember I was talking about Hitler earlier and his Reichstag fire, which happened in 33, much like Twin Towers. Knocked down his own building or burnt his own building and then blamed it on a different party, a boogeyman. Reichstag fire equals 74. Much like Independence Day, much like Parables, Masonic, Jewish occult, cross, Gematria, killing. A little bit more on the 47. If you're a gamer like me, Hitman, one of my favourite games ever. I always used to wonder, why is it Agent 47? Why not Agent 10 or some shit? I don't know. Now I know. Agent equals 47 in Ordinal. It's pretty much that fucking simple, guys. And to come full circle, Darth Vader is also 47. Mr. 11th Sephiroth himself. Mr. 101 himself is also Mr. 47. All these numbers are linked, people. And also 7 plus 4 is 11. Just putting that out there. Know some more on the 47. Obey is 47. Judge is 47. Beast is 47. Time is 47. Meditation 47. And if you know who this is here, capital Steez, young mastermind, unfortunately took his own life. Well, so they say. He was a heavy proponent of the number 47, and he actually designed that logo right there, which is 47 mixed in with a swastika. And if you know the origins of the swastika, then yeah, you know he was playing with people's emotions when he did that. Rest in peace to him. Star of David 47, we've spoke about the Star of David and how that fits into the tree of life. Vibration 47. Saddam Hussein 47, another so-called boogeyman. Republican is also 47. President Authority Christian 47. And the self-proclaimed beast, Aleister Crowley, died in 1947. It's a big number, but let's carry on. It's where it gets interesting. So Isaiah, biblical verses. Isaiah equals 47. If we go to the chapter, Isaiah 47:11, two numbers paramount in this ritual. Let's see what it reads. A disaster will come upon you, and you will not know how to conjure it away. Let's check the next one. So disaster will overtake you, and you won't be able to charm it away. But evil shall come upon you, of which you will not know how to charm away. Can you see a recurring pattern here? It's pretty prophetic, right? I mean, same numbers used in the ritual. Isaiah equals 47, and it's to do with this verse about a disaster that we're not going to know the origin of. Yeah, come on, man, don't play. That's ridiculous. So that's foreshadowing. Well, if this verse isn't a description of what happened on 9/11, then I don't know what is. So it's just some more predictive programming. But it all fits together very well. It's the same numbers you see. Even Isaiah equals 47. And of course, lo and behold, the boogeyman that did it all, Osama bin Laden, equals 47. Right, so remember, this is all to decode the 175. We're learning about this 47. So let's take a more direct route to that now. So the Egyptian goddess Isis, who we can see here, who's also been used as another name for a terror group that we know. So the Egyptian goddess Isis, who was the eldest daughter of Kronos, or Saturn, as said by Manly P. Hall, and remember, Saturn is our father, and it dominates time on Earth. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my previous video, because I give a deep explanation as to why this is, and as to why the Saturn death cult worship the cube. Now, Isis is typically presented on a cube or a square. We can see in this picture here, she stands on this box which reads, the fruit which I have brought forth is the sun. Again, down here, Isis is on a box, and again, on here, she's always represented on some type of square, and this square represents Earth, as we know, and its relationship to Saturn. Again, check my last video. Now, if you look at this Rubik's Cube down here, so this is a 3D cube presented on a two-dimensional flat plane. So we can see here that there are 7 points and 3 faces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 corners and 3 faces. Now the 7 corners relate to the 7 veils of Isis, or our chakra system, and the 3 faces represent the Trinity, or the triple manifestation of the goddess, if you're familiar with those teachings. And the number 7 also relates to divine perfection, because of the 7 primary celestial bodies, and it's also one short of 8, which is infinity. So it's essentially encapsulating the perfection before the infinite, which leads to the end, which is the 9, which is the last number. Now, we know the cube is represented by the number 4 due to its relation to the square. So the number 47 is a direct tribute to Isis and her father Saturn, the ruler of time, who controls Earth, with the 7 representing the unveiling of Isis, and the 4 representing Earth, or the cube, or 4-dimensional time, or Saturn, whatever way you want to look at it. So we've got Isis on the cube, Isis, the daughter of Saturn. Now if you think about the number 47, we can do some maths. Isis on the cube is 7/4. 7 represents Isis, 4 represents the cube. If you do this, 7 divided by 4 equals 1.75. And that's where you get your flat 175 from. It's a direct tribute to Isis. in the middle of her twin pillars, much like how Darth resides in the middle of the pillars of severity and mercy. Now, if we apply this same process to the number 33, which is associated with the opening of the Kundalini and the chakras, we do 33 over 7, which is the divination of Isis, and we get 4.7 to 1 decimal place, which works out absolutely perfectly. It's the same numbers over and over again. Can you see the links? Also, 330 days is equal to 47 weeks, and I can't even begin to name the amount of people that have been 86 by this code. Jim Carrey's girlfriend is one of them, after he came out and made that comment on, I think it was Jimmy Fallon or something, where he put a triangle up and put a tongue through his mouth. Exactly 330 days on the nose after he came out and did that, his girlfriend was buried, which he was accused of doing, which he didn't do, obviously. So yeah, there's your flat 175, guys. And there's this relation to the 47, and there's this relation to the 33. Now, if we look at building 7, which fell sometime later, it was actually 47 stories tall, no surprises there, and each floor had 47,000 square feet of rentable office space. So to say this were built by the numbers is an absolute understatement. Now let's take a look at 175 on the Gematria side of things. In God We Trust, Boston Marathon 175 as another false flag attack. The great deception, possibly the greatest deception that's ever been pulled on humanity, was 9/11. So fitting that equals 175. Satanic worship. Well, I don't really need to say much more about that, do I? Misinformation. How much misinformation was we fed about 9/11 realistically? It's ridiculous. The ruler of time, and there we go back to Saturn again. Now in relation to Isis on the 175 as well, as you can see, Holy Trinity equals 175. Now, as I've mentioned before, numbers have their good and bad sides, because everything works off the poles of polarity and duality. So obviously the Holy Trinity is something to be looked at as a positive thing, but you'll also get the inverse and the perversion of that. So sexual assault also equals 175. Me Too movement equals 175. And I did not have sexual relations with that woman equals 175. I found that quite funny. You see how they do this? New World Order 175. Exactly 11 years prior 9/11, on the very day this old guy, our good old friend, called for a new world order in this meeting. And exactly 11 years later on the day, we had 9/11. And to lead us nicely into the next one, flight 77. 77 equals 175 as well. So let's get into breaking that down. So this is the last one we're going to be looking at, flight 77 and the Pentagon. Let's just do this because this isn't difficult. Right, height 77 feet. Height 77 feet, windows 7,754. 2 77s already. American Airlines flight 77 left at 8:20. Yep. 9:37 crashes into the western side of the Pentagon. 8:20 to 9:37. From takeoff to crash, 77 minutes. Also, the Pentagon sits on the 77th meridian west. So let's review this. Flight 77 hit the 77 feet tall building on the 77th meridian after crashing 77 minutes after takeoff. Yeah, sure it did. 77 is a mystical number. If you know Mark Passio, he calls it the number of the magician. He doesn't explain why, but I got a pretty good idea why. So 77 is of incredible importance. Like I said earlier, it is to do with divine perfection and completion, because of the 7 primary bodies and because it's one step before infinity. So let's take a look at some more 7s. 7 days of the week, 7 notes in the music scale. 7 is also the last prime under 10. 7 directions, 7 colours, 7 pharaohs in Egypt. Read through all those, you can see all the 7s all over the place. Head, chest, abdomen, 2 legs and arms. 7 internal organs, the stomach, the liver, the heart, the lungs, the spleen and 2 kidneys. And Saturn's rings are divided up into 7 major systems, so this number is clearly embedded in our lives all over the place. And let's check the Gematria hit. 77, sacrificed, no surprise there. World Trade Center, 77, no surprise there. September 11th, 77, no surprise there. Also notice the North Meridian is 38 degrees, yeah. 38 equals pentagon. 38 is also the murder number, like 83. Now, on the face of it, this doesn't need too much decoding because it's pretty much right in front of your eyes. However, we need to go into the importance of the 7. And for the Kabbalah, the 7th Sephiroth ties into beauty, and is also tied in with Isis. And the center of the tree of life is to do with the balance of all 6 of these Sephiroth. As you can see here with Isis, she is depicted in between 2 poles, in between Jachin and Boaz, in between the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity. Now, if you look at these pillars, you can see they each have 3 Sephiroth on them. So, metaphysically speaking, the balance of these pillars or poles would bring forth polarity, or the 7th Sephiroth, which would reside in the middle, which would look something like this. Symbolism is rife throughout history, and the idea of 2 poles or pillars symbolizes some sort of gateway, similar to how black and white form grey. The general idea is that 2 opposing principles can form another in the centre to bring forth polarity. So we have the balance of the pillar of severity, the balance of the pillar of mercy, which will bring forth our centre point. So this is the archetype of Darth Vader. Hopefully this makes more sense now. It's Anakin on the light. Anakin had his dark. He balanced it out and he brought forth Darth Vader and chose the dark. Also notice how this looks like 101. This is what I was talking about earlier, and the way that these numbers come out is not coincidence. It's not a coincidence that this is a 0 point between 2 poles, and it can be represented in the same way with the Kabbalah and how the tree of life is actually drawn. That looks like a 101. Also, this same system can be seen in sacred geometry with the egg of life. This is the exact same thing I'm talking about, but just in a different formation. It's the 6 circles becoming balanced and bringing forth that center point. Now, Crowley was obsessed with the number 77, and if you're familiar with his works, he had the Liberos, which he coined the famous line, "Do as thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law." And as you can see here, we've got Jay-Z wearing his nice little cute t-shirt, because Hollywood is pretty much run by Satanists and Crowley and LaVey lovers, and I'm pretty much all aware of that. I mean, just look at Pizzagate, John Podesta, Marina Abramovich. Come on, you're fucking psychos, mate. Right, so there is another side to this 77 that comes away from the Kabbalah and the idea of divine perfection. And to understand this, you need to look at Crowley's cosmology. I'm going to sum this up as quick as I can because it's a pretty loaded topic. However, in a nutshell, what Crowley tries to do is systematize and encapsulate the female and male aspects of creation and existence. So once again, it's bringing us back to this idea of poles, Jachin and Boaz, male and female, phallus and vagina, same thing. These two bringing forth together to bring in something new. He wanted to encapsulate that and, like I said, systematize it and bring forth some kind of philosophical analysis of how this came about. His philosophy can be represented by this pretty simple picture here, which shows a circle and a dot. So the circle represents the female aspect, which is very similar to sort of boundless, infinite space. I really wish my phone would shut the fuck up. So this outer circle, yeah, it represents the female aspect. It's the womb, it's boundless space, it's the point of non-origin, it's the immeasurable point, it's the point that can only be measured once their center point has been attained, if you get what I mean. So for Crowley, this circle represented the womb, and he called that Nut, which referred to the night sky, but he also called this Layla, as we will see in a second. So we have the Crowley's womb, which is the outer circle, which is boundless infinity of physical space. Now we have the center point, which is the male aspect, which is the seed. This is where the phallus comes into it, because it's the impregnation of the womb which brings forth life. So this dot in the middle is the male seed, the seed of impregnation. It's the light that penetrates the darkness. To sum that up, the circle is Layla and the dot is who he calls Halal. Now we need to understand this. So we have this male aspect and this female aspect, and respectively their names in Hebrew were Ly, Lh and Hyll. Both had a gematria value of 75. However, there were no written vowels in Hebrew, and to verbalize these names and to actually make them into deities that can be invoked by speech and vibration, there would need to be the addition of vowels, hence where we get Layla and Haylau, because there is the addition of two A's which go here and here, here and here. This was Crowley's idea of his secret cosmology, which brought these ideas together, and as you can see, which is actually what drove him to his love for the number 77. So Layla and Haylau previously was 75, but with the addition of the Aleph in two spaces, the Aleph is the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, but with the addition of the A or the Aleph twice in each word, we now get the new value of 77. So in other words, these two words in their written form contain the four constant sounds, and these four constant sounds have a total gematria of 75. But both words require the addition of two vowels to make them audible, and because the Aleph in Hebrew, or A, has a gematria value of 1, the addition of two A's to these words to make them audible changes it from 75 to 77. Now, this is a key concept because the core system of Thelema is actually known as AA. This is also called Argentium Astrum, and that is Latin for silver star. And as you can see here, the AA is a spiritual organisation described in 1907 by occultist Aleister Crowley. This is what this has to do with Layla and Hayla. AA, does that remind you of anything? Because it did me. AA, just like that. So there is a direct Crowley tribute with that. The whole premise of this AA organisation is built on this idea of making those two words in Hebrew be able to become audible, and the only way that was done was by changing the gematria value to this 77. So we can see why flight 77 was used, because again we're coming back to this idea of the ninth Sephiroth of creation and foundation, and why more than 770 were actually injured. This is Layla. She was actually a real person. She was Crowley's Scarlet Woman, and she was immortalized in his Book of Lies. Not really relevant, but you know, Layla was a real person. So yeah, Liberos 77. It's like a single page of instructions. It's a bit like the 10 Commandments, but Crowley's version. A little more on 77. Divide et impera, which is Latin for divide and rule, equals 77. Now, if you are familiar with Crowley, you also know that he had this other work called 777. And in 777, he pretty much tried to systematize and bring all religions under one umbrella of thought. So let's check some of the hits on 777. We've got Order Out of Chaos, which is Novus Seclorum. We know how they work. That's a mantra they've used for how long, I don't even know. Numeric Ritual 777. I think it was pretty fair to say that 9/11 was a numeric ritual. Great Pyramid 777. Self-explanatory. The Luciferian Doctrine 777, again back to this idea of Satanism. Initiation Ritual 777. We was most definitely initiated into a different fucking paradigm of energy on 9/11. I'm deep into this, but Google quantum computers and see what they're doing. See, you know about the Mandela effect, right? If you don't, Google it. Google quantum computers and the Mandela effect, and CERN as well. And CERN as well be in on this shit. But again, that's a different topic. That's a whole different topic. CERN and quantum physics is just, yeah, they be doing some sneaky shit over at CERN, I'll tell you that right now. Right, Solstice Ritual 777. 9/11 was 11 days prior to the end of the summer solstice, as you can see right here. Couldn't get any more perfect than that, I don't think it could. The fall equinox began on September the 22nd. 11 days prior to that, we had 9/11, which ended the summer solstice. Solstice Ritual equals 777. No surprises here. And just a quick bit of maths relation between these numbers and the 77s. So 77 out of the 777, 14 out of the 21, 2/3, 0.666. I mean, if you're good at maths and you're pretty quick, you've got that straight away, but let me run through it. 77 out of the 777, if you combine those,
7 and 7 is 14. 7, 7, 7 is 21. 14 out of 21. So 77 out of 777 is the same as saying 14 out of 21. 14 out of 21 is 2/3, okay? So 77 out of 777 is the same way as saying 2/3, and 2/3 as a decimal and a percentage comes back to recurring sixes. So 7 out of 777 equals 0.666, and like I said, Liber Oz equals 666, and Liber Oz detailed the 77s. I hope that makes sense. There's a lot of shit there, I know, a lot of information to tie together, but that is why those numbers were used, and I hope you can see the relation between this idea of the 11 and poles and polarity, and if you balance these poles, something will manifest in the middle. You will bring forth polarity, so to say. You bring forth this 11th Sephiroth, this hidden Sephiroth of knowledge or death, which you can then choose to actualize into positive or negative, because you have free will. 9 and 11 are very important numbers in the occult, and this should show you why. In the next part, we're going to detail and go over Flight 93 and some more of its relations to Saturn. We're also going to dive into the history of stargates and cubes and yeah, all that shit. Saturn 119. We're going to get into all of that, but I'm going to save it for the next video. Also notice the memorial for 9/11. What is it? It's a black box, right? Right, it's a black box, yeah. What do we know about black boxes? What's ISIS standing on top of? A black box. We know black boxes are linked with Saturn. We know there's a black box in the middle of Mecca called the Kabbalah that they circle 7 times. So what's really going on here? I'm gonna break it all down in